Hello, my name is Dan Skipdown, and this is the Top 5 Weekly, where myself and some guests talk about a topic. It could be an actor, it could be a director, it could be an actress, or it could just be a generic topic, which this evening it is a generic, a regular topic, a genre of movies. Well, I guess it's not a popular genre, but with 1917 coming out in wide release next week, I figured why not do World War I films? And I got two great guests with me this evening. Mr. Joseph Olivas, welcome to the Top 5 Weekly. How you doing this evening?
Me.
Say that again.
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for having me.
All right. You're welcome. Yeah, no problem. I'm glad that I could have you. And Mr. Jeremy Adams, welcome again, my buddy, good buddy. You always bail me out and coming on the show. And I knew. I mean, there's no topic that you couldn't talk about, come up with 5 movies for. So you're always good for almost any of these topics.
I mean, if you did, I don't know, Rob Schneider or something, I might have an issue. But by and large, yeah, I love to come and talk about all these topics. And I actually kind of pushed for the one today. It's a little more in depth. It's a little more specific. But I think that allows you to talk about some really great movies that don't get talked about as much. So I always love to join for these.
Yeah, and you know, and I remember I was going to make it war films, and no, let's do World War I. I'm like, all right. I've seen so many World War I films. People like, I've only seen one. I've only seen 2. Well, I'm sorry, you're missing out because there's a lot of great World War I films.
And we'll tell you about some today, and you can check them out.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it. Let's not mess around, Joseph. You know the rules. So if your number 5 happens to be one of ours, we're just gonna say hold off. So let's get it started with your number 5.
So my number 5 is 1941.
I'd say that again.
He said,
York.
Yeah, Sergeant York.
Okay, we're gonna have to hold off on that, Joseph, because at least one of us has it on their list. So now we're gonna go to Jeremy. Jeremy, what is your number 5?
All right. I have a feeling you guys aren't going to have my number 5. This is a movie that I saw way back when I was actually in film school. We were studying some of the early pioneering directors, and one of the directors that we studied, his name is King Vidor, and he did, in the silent era, he did some landmark movies. One that we watched is The Crowd, which is a really great film that he directed, but one of his other standout films was a 1925 silent film called The Big Parade, which is one of the first World War I movies. It starred John Gilbert, who was one of the big, huge name stars of the silent era. Unfortunately, one of the people didn't make the transition to the sound era because he was just so good in that silent form of acting, he couldn't make the transition over. But this is a great showcase for him and for the direction. It's a what would seem like a pretty standard story now, but this was one of the first kind of versions of it. It's this kind of rich guy, kind of aimless. His family's telling him, you need to do something with your life. You're just kind of a layabout. And then the war is going on, and he decides to go and get involved. And it gets, they filmed the trench warfare. It's very exciting and shocking and as terrifying as it would be for any World War I film. And even though it's an old movie, I think the scenes of him there in the trench warfare still really hold up. There's some great kind of storylines with him getting to know some of the French soldiers that he's connecting with, and then there's a love story that develops as well. But it really kind of set the template because it doesn't glorify war. It shows how horrifying it is, and it would lead to another film that would come a little later that I'm sure we're going to talk about that also dealt with this topic. So The Big Parade from director King Vidor is my number 5.
Jeremy, I have not seen this film. I apologize to you.
No.
I've seen a lot of films, and I have not seen with this one. Joseph, have you seen this film?
I have not.
And that's why I had it, because it's not, you know, a lot of these silent films aren't as well seen these days, and I just thought I'd kind of give a little love to one and recommend it to you guys.
All right, well, I'm going to take a cue from Jeremy, and I'm going to talk about a silent film. This one actually won the very first Academy Award for Best Picture, called Wings. Does anybody have Wings on their list?
So I have to admit, I've seen The Big Parade, and I haven't seen Wings.
Oh.
Go figure.
All right,
All right, Joe has it.
Number 4. So after I'm done talking about Joseph, you take it away. All right, so Wings stars Claire Bow, Charles Rogers, Richard Alden. It's basically the story of these two guys, Jack and David, who are in love with the same girl. It's in the onset of creating cars and planes, but the title, obviously, Wings. This takes place during World War I. These two guys end up getting enlisted and heading out to World War I, but they become pilots. And I'll tell you what, in this era, for them to do the dog fighting and the flying and all the it is crazy. It is a crazy, crazy movie for the time that it came out to be so good and so incredible. It's from director, I got it right. It's multiple directors, William Hellman and Harry Abares or whatever. It's like I can't pronounce this. Maybe you know who the hell these guys are, Joseph. But that last guy, I could not pronounce his name. But it has a cameo by somebody that we will not get into just yet. We're not going to talk about the cameo yet, because I want to talk about the cameo from this movie a little bit later on in the show. Joseph, you got any thoughts about Wings?
So yes, this movie is, I think, slightly dated, just because of how the telling the was time. It's kind of cool watching it from the time period, seeing it made.
I think he's pretty frozen.
You're breaking up, Joseph. I'm going to go to Jeremy real quick. Jeremy, you got any thoughts on Wings?
Yeah, like I said, I actually haven't seen that one.
Wow.
Seen parts of, yeah. I saw the less known silent World War I film, The Big Parade. But yeah, I've seen parts of Wings. And obviously, I know about it being an Oscar buff, but yeah, it's one I still need to catch up with. But you can't deny how groundbreaking it is, and I like that with The Big Parade. You got the trench warfare. With Wings, you get the aerial combat, so it really kind of gives you two sides of that war, both made during the same period.
Yeah, and let's go back to Joseph. You got any more thoughts on this?
I do like. I really like seeing how and the war scenes were told, and the core holds up in that. Am I good?
Oh, we lost you again. I think you might.
You're good now.
You might be good back now.
Yeah. So, good.
Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah. So the core friendship in the story.
And you're gone.
Two guys, friends. Oh.
Yeah. All right. So Wings was my 5 and Joseph's 4. So since that was Joseph's 4, we'll go to Jeremy and get his 4. And if it's either on our list, Jeremy will just hold up and we'll just move along. Go ahead with your Jeremy.
I have a feeling it might be. This is the movie that I was hinting at before. After The Big Parade, that kind of inspired next very important World War I drama, an adaptation of a very famous book. This time, not from the American side, but from the German side of things, and it is All Quiet on the Western Front. Do you guys?
Oh
have
yeah,
that one?
I definitely
right.
pull the brakes on that
So
one.
we'll come back to that one. Yeah, I have that as well.
So let me go with my number 4, which is okay. Now this is a movie. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet. It's been in theaters. You can get it on HBO Max or various, and then they have different, like they took it out of theaters and they brought it back to theaters over the last year or so, last year and a half. It's called They Shall Not Grow Old. It's a documentary. Has anybody seen this documentary?
No, I haven't had a chance yet, unfortunately. I was hoping that I'd get to for today, but I haven't. But yeah, I've been very interested to see it. Very kind of on a funny note, it came up in a trivia match between me and Joseph.
Oh, wow.
Actually, was a very important point scored in that match. But no, it's a movie I've been meaning to see for sure. It is, so I don't have it.
Joseph, have you seen They Shall Not Grow? Is it on your list?
He doesn't have it.
Okay. All right. So, They Shall Not Grow Old is about this group of soldiers, British soldiers, French soldiers or British soldiers. I think it's so.
I
think it's British soldiers, and it's just the whole movie is from their point of view and their perspective, and it starts out in black and white because it's old footage of this group of guys. It's like archival footage of this whole brigade, or I don't know what you'll call the people, the groupings of people within this army. And then halfway through the movie, it goes to color. And this is what was the groundbreaking thing about this movie. Peter Jackson, Peter Jackson, the guy that did the Lord of the Rings trilogy and King Kong and all these movies, he worked on this for years, trying to get this archival footage turned into a documentary. But the thing that he really wanted to make it special is halfway through the movie, it's in color. And you get to see the kind of because a lot of these movies that take place in World War I are in black and white, so you don't get to see the color aspect of what was going on. And it's an ugly look. War is ugly. We all know that. I'm not going to get into this whole. But this movie, by showing the color of the uniforms, the hair, the faces, and stuff, it kind of gives a little bit of life to these people, these nameless guys that you don't really know who they are, and this archival footage is immaculate. What he does with this footage is incredible. I cannot say enough about if anybody watches this show and you have not seen They Shall Not Grow Old, it was one of the best documentaries last year. There's some talk that it wasn't released the year before, and it was released this year because it came out in February. But then people like me saw it the year before. So there's been some bickering back and forth whether this is going to be nominated for Best Documentary this year, or was it eligible only last year? What I meant is 2 years ago. I know we're in a new year, 2020 now, but what I meant to say is 2018. Was it eligible 2018? Or is it eligible 2019? So there's been a lot of back and forth about that, and I would love to see it get nominated for documentary this coming Oscars, just to shed some light on this great documentary. And last year we had a bunch of great documentaries. 2018 did, and I think it would be great to get put some more eyes on They Shall Not Grow Old. Jeremy, do you know anything about this?
I've heard about, Peter Jackson took this old footage, and I get it was kind of, the effort to take old footage and then try to bring it to life so that you actually are kind of transported back into the time where it was captured by adding sound to it, by trying to recreate some of the interviews that the guys gave, by adding color to certain scenes. And it really was a step forward in kind of archival techniques and filmmaking, archiving sort of stuff. So yeah, it's one I've been wanting to see for sure. And I just thought it was kind of amazing, after all the big movies Peter Jackson's made, that he would, devote his time to a project like that is pretty amazing, and admirable. And it kind of reminds me of like when James Cameron took like a decade off and was doing documentary stuff. It's really interesting when these guys kind of devote themselves to that kind of filmmaking when they could just be making the big blockbusters still.
Yeah, no, you're right. And he explored the ocean with all these documentaries that James Cameron did. You're right. Joseph, you got any thoughts on They Shall Not Grow Old?
I haven't gotten to it yet, but I want to.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine. Hey,
great.
This is the thing about the show, and Jeremy will tell you this also. That's why he likes coming on this show, is because we shed light, we share movies that people may not have seen. And then, like, spoiler, on the last episode, my guest didn't see some of the movies that me and my other guests were talking about. And then they made a list of movies that they want to watch now because of us talking about those movies. And so that's one of the good things about the Top 5 Weekly. And I really want to implore people, if you watch the show, you're going to learn about films you never heard of. And there were some films on the last episode, and there's good films on this episode that are great films that
Absolutely.
I cannot say enough to watch. And Jeremy's already brought one up. I brought two up. Joseph's brought one of the greatest of all time up, Wings. So let's go back to Joseph for number 3. What is your number 3, Joseph?
So my number 3 is the other Western Front.
Hold off there. Let's hold off there.
Which one was it? I didn't hear.
All Quiet on the Western Front.
Okay. He had it at number 3. Perfect.
Yeah, we got to hold off, Joseph. We're going to get to a discussion about that. I apologize. Every time you mention a movie, we have to hold off on it. But you got a chance to talk a little bit about Wings. All right, Jeremy, what is your number 3?
We'll see if we're going to hold off on this one. This is another one of, in my opinion, the all-time classic films. My number 5, we had Trench Warfare. And then you mentioned Wings, where you had the aerial combat, but a lot of World War I also took place in different parts of the world, including Africa. So my number 3 is The African Queen. Do either of you guys have that one?
Wow. I saw that on the list of World War I. And I said, is that a World War I movie?
It is.
Absolutely.
I
seen it years and years ago, so I did not have it. Joseph, do you have that on your list?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jeremy, go.
Okay, he
Be
doesn't
my
have it.
guest. I know you love Humphrey Bogart.
I do.
I'm glad you get a chance to talk about Humphrey Bogart again.
Yeah, so this film was directed by John Huston. It came out in 1951. It stars Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn, and it actually is the film that Humphrey Bogart won the Best Actor Oscar for. Some people kind of argue maybe Marlon Brando should have won that year, but it is a tremendous performance. Humphrey Bogart plays this kind of broken down, drunk riverboat captain, and Katharine Hepburn is a missionary, and she's kind of like trying to go downriver in Africa on this mission for the Allies and for our side, and he's not very interested, but he kind of agrees to help her with the mission. And they run in, there's a lot of cool kind of adventure stuff that happens. They have to deal with the animals down there and with river rapids and all kinds of crazy stuff, and ultimately they do get into a little bit of a combat situation, but really the movie's less about being a wartime drama as it is about these characters and ultimately a love story. And I've always found it very touching. I think with those particular actors, you just really get drawn into them connecting to each other, and you buy into it, even though it could seem a little ridiculous that these two would connect in that way. But when you've got tremendous, all-time great actors like this, you absolutely buy it. And these were two that you didn't see I don't know that you saw them in any other movies together, and it's an amazing thing to see. I kind of consider my favorite actress of all time Katharine Hepburn, and then of course the legend Humphrey Bogart, really at their best, giving some of their best work. And it's a little bit of a unique among the other World War I movies we're talking about, but it's a great one. And yes, it is World War I, and it is that combat, and it's one of the best.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. You know how much I love Humphrey Bogart. We actually on the first incarnation of the Top
Mhm.
Five Weekly, we did a whole month of classic episodes, and we did Humphrey Bogart. You and I
Yeah.
did. That was the first time I met you, and we did something on
Yes.
air, and we got a chance to talk about Humphrey Bogart and African Queen. What a great film! And Katharine Hepburn. I mean, you can't ask for two better than John Huston, one of the great directors
Yeah.
of all time. I mean, if you don't put him on the list of one of the great directors of all time, you just don't know movies, because the guy's
Absolutely.
an absolute legend. I love this film, and I love Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn and stuff.
The
again,
one little like extra bonus thing I'll say is that there was a book written about this called White Hunter Black Heart, which was kind of pretty much based on John Huston's bad behavior during the making of this film, because he was kind of this larger than life alcoholic type guy. And then Clint Eastwood actually made a movie out of the book, White Hunter Black Heart, where
Wow.
he's basically playing John Huston. So it's kind of even though they don't call him John Huston in the movie and they kind of change it, it really is about the making of this film and about John Huston. So that's kind of an extra little footnote that you can kind of look
I
at.
have to see that now, Jeremy.
Yeah, it's a pretty good movie.
It's
It's an underrated Clint Eastwood movie for sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna have to see that now. See, that's what. Look at that, Jeremy. You brought up something. Now I got to go see,
Yeah.
find out, seek out something, another movie. Joseph, you got any thoughts on African Queen?
Ooh. Not, but I'm one of those people that think that Humphrey Bogart is good in the movie. River scenes are really well done, and
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You're absolutely right. All right, so it goes to me for my number three. I don't know if you guys seen this film or not. We're gonna find out right here. You know, we've all been talking about so many different kinds of films from different kinds of directors, from different kinds of. I'm do my number three is a film from director Jean-Paul Jeannot.
Ooh, nice.
Heard of Jean-Paul Jeannot?
Mm-hmm.
Jean-Paul Jeannot, very famous French director. He made a movie with probably one of the most famous French actresses of the last however many years, Audrey Tautou. You guys know who Audrey Tautou is, I hope.
We do.
She was in a little movie called Amelie. And
Jean-Pierre Jeunet.
yeah. And the movie is a very long engagement where her and her husband, her fiance, they love each other. They're just smitten with each other. Then he has to go off to World War I, and he disappears in World War I. And the whole movie is she hires a detective, and the detective go about trying to find out what happened to her fiance. It has a really interesting cast. Like I said, some of these French names are hard for me to pronounce, but it does have a cameo by Jodie Foster, in case you didn't know her.
Interesting.
She plays Elodie Gordis in the movie. And it's a lot of these people are French. Marion Cotillard, you might know her.
Yeah.
She plays a character by the name of Tina Lombardi. It's a long movie, and it's in subtitles because it's French. But if you really want to see a great movie, I cannot say enough about how just beautiful this movie. It's so beautiful. I mean, for a movie about World War I, we're getting into because it's an ugly war. Like I said, ugly war. But it's a long film, but it's a gorgeous film. And Audrey Tautou, I mean, I could watch her read the phone book. I mean, that's how amazing she is. And she's great in this movie. So I wanted to make sure that I talked about a very long engagement. Joseph, have you seen this film?
No.
You haven't? That's all right. It's a foreign film. A lot of people don't go out of the way to see foreign films. Jeremy, you got any thoughts on A Very Long Engagement?
Yeah, I actually haven't seen this one either. It's one that I've heard about. I remember when it came out and hearing such great things about the visuals and everything. I mean, I have seen some Jean-Pierre Jeunet movies. I've seen Amélie, Delicatessen, obviously the Alien Resurrection, which the less said about the better. But a really great filmmaker, and it's one that I have been wanting to see, and I'm very glad you had it. And it's kind of nice how we're complimenting each other by having picks that the other guys haven't seen, because there are more great World War I movies than you might think, especially when you go into foreign cinema, because it was a world war, so it affected a lot of people, and there's a lot of different stories to tell.
And especially the French, because
absolutely,
the war took place in France. Most of it did, you know. So it would affect the French, and what a great choice to make a movie about World War I for Jean-Paul Jeunet. All right, so now I think we're going to start getting into the ones that we all have. So let's get into Joseph's number 2, and I'm sure somebody has already said your number 2 already, more than likely, Joseph.
My number 2 is
Which one?
Say that again. Oh, wow.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Okay.
That's number 2.
Yeah. I just want to say something about, okay, I saw this when I was looking up World War I movies. Not that I had to look them up. I just looked them up just to be safe. And it said Lawrence of Arabia. I said, oh, my God, Lawrence of Arabia is World War I movie? And I'm like, oh, crap. And I didn't have it on my list. I don't even have it in my honorable mentions. Jeremy, do you have Lawrence of Arabia?
I don't have it, so I'm glad that Joseph got it so that he can talk about it. I've kind of famously said before that this isn't one of my favorite movies. I have great respect for it, so it wasn't going to make my list. So we'll let Joseph talk about it, because it certainly deserves to be talked about, and I'm glad that he has
absolutely.
it.
I'm not shocked that someone brought it up. I'm just glad someone brought it up, like you said.
Yeah, and I think you're wrong. I think we're going to have some movies at the top of our list that are different from the other people, which is good.
All right. So, Joseph, go ahead. Wax poetic about Lawrence of Arabia, one of the greatest movies of all time.
I liked this movie the first time I saw it, but then I loved it more. The breathtaking. That's just one aspect of it. But what really drew me into the movie was the story of this character. He just this character of how he tried to help or in Arabia with the other characters played by Sharif, Quinn, and Alec Guinness is what he got me movie, just to see how his progression went from fighting for the British, but then having a switch on his view of, and then to help people there. You could, it's the Gully, and for better or worse, even Avatar, because all those stories have at the with how this helped the Arabics in this story in World War I.
No, I cannot say enough. I mean, I know we're all familiar with Dennis Zen in this space. It's Dennis Zen's favorite movie of all time. This guy loves John Roca is another one that loves it. We're familiar with John Roca. It's just an absolute classic. David Lean, I mean, made an absolute masterpiece. There's no mincing words here, Joseph. Anything you say about it is correct. Anybody that has anything to say about this film, I just think, and I know Jeremy isn't the biggest fan of it, but he doesn't respect the effort and what went into making this movie and the acting and everything that's in the movie. It's just he's not the biggest fan of it, which is different than saying, oh, it's not a good movie, or it's not a good effort, or it's not good acting, or anything like that. Jeremy, you got any thoughts? Even though I know it's not your biggest fan of it.
Yeah, it's a movie that I've always respected. I just personally have never been that engaged by the main story of Lawrence and his character. But I will say our good friend Paul Oyama, that you might know from Schmodown Circles, I had a talk with him, and he basically told me I need to withhold judgment until I can see this movie on the big screen. Apparently, this is one where if you actually get the chance to go and see it on the big screen, it'll change your life and give you a whole new kind of viewpoint on it. So that is something I plan to do at some point in my life, and then who knows, maybe I'll have a new appreciation for the story and everything in the film more than I do at the moment. So again, it's a towering achievement in filmmaking, and I'm very glad that it came up. And again, a very different kind of side of the war. This was, like I said, it's a world war, so there are a lot of different, very varying kind of stories to tell. And during that.
World wars just don't take place in one place. They take place all over the world.
Yeah.
As we know from World War II as well.
Mm-hmm.
Good job on that one, Joseph. All right, so Jeremy, it's up to you for number 2.
All right. I have a feeling at least one of you guys has this one, if I know the guy well. My number 2, I have the great Stanley Kubrick film, Paths of Glory.
Hold up.
There you go.
All right, so we'll hold up. We're gonna hold off until we get to Joseph's number 1, because because you already did Joseph's number 2. We're gonna just hold off on that. And I will just, when that time comes, I'm just gonna give a caveat on why Paths of Glory is not on my list. All right, but we're gonna talk about my number 2, which is Joseph's number 5. That is Sergeant York, starring and winning an Academy Award, Mr. Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper is so freaking amazing in this movie. And the person I was going to bring up that had a cameo in Wings, guess who it was? Gary Cooper. as Private White. He's in the movie very briefly, but you could tell it's Gary Cooper. So this is about a guy that lives in Tennessee with his family. He's kind of an alcoholic. He is kind of a rabble rouser, and he's trying to he's in love with this girl, and he's trying to do something that he thinks is the right thing to do to get her to marry him. And so what he does is he changes his way. He finds God, he finds Jesus, and he starts working to buy this pasture of land. And then something happens, and he ends up having to go to war. He gets enlisted in the military, and it's a black and white film. Like Joseph said, it came out in 1941, but it's a true story. This is the true story of Sergeant York, this guy that actually made an absolutely crazy, Alvin C. York is his name. He goes over to war, and because of his skills as a rifleman, in the Tennessee hills, he ends up capturing hundreds of German soldiers because he could pick them off one by one, and they give up. So him and his buddy, which is about 6 other guys, end up capturing about 300 German soldiers and bringing them back. Hey, what do you want to do with these guys? What do you mean? What do we want? We have room for all these soldiers. He ends up becoming a hero of World War I. Joseph, take it away.
I agree with that scene with where the Germans and then captured group that most like a Sergeant York as like um I I like how they show his expression at first as he wants to be away from the war as good as away from the war possible. And he later, like when he once he gets enlisted, he eventually gets the idea that the war, while he's in the war, and save co-patriots, fellow soldiers, and that's what I like about that particular German. Once the German soldiers surrender and then they're captured, he stops, like he allows them the respect that he wants to do for his own fellow soldiers. He saves them as he tries to save them first, and then which is why he wanted to avoid kill anyone, but once he saw that he could save people more, then that's when he that's the biggest part of the movie and most memorable part of the movie. Also, I agree with Gary. Give a great performance, and I'm glad he won the Oscar for that.
Yeah. What Joseph's trying to say is he was a conscientious objector, but then he realized if he goes to war and he uses his skill to help, he could save lives. That's basically what Joseph was trying to say. Jeremy, you got any thoughts on Sergeant York?
Fortunately, I don't, because this is one that I haven't seen in many, many years, so it's a little foggy for me. Probably close to 25 years or so since I've seen this one. But I remember it being a great film, and obviously I'm very aware of it. It's from the great filmmaker Howard Hawks, who is another one with John Huston, one of the great old Hollywood filmmakers who did so many different types of movies, different genres. I mean, around the same time, he did Bringing Up Baby, which is one of the all-time great screwball comedies. So to have that range to make both those movies just shows you what a great filmmaker he was. And I think this one, though I haven't seen it in a while, I think that, it's a great movie for people to seek out that kind of gives you a different kind of war hero, somebody who's coming from a very different place. And I think it actually might make a good double feature with Hacksaw Ridge, which is another war film. And they're both about men of faith and how did they approach, serving their country in a time of war and kind of what they have to go through in that inner conflict. So, yeah, it's a great pick. And if I'd seen it more recently, I'm sure it would have shot up for me.
Yeah, very good point about Hacksaw Ridge, Jeremy.
Yeah.
All right, guys, this is what I'm going to do here. Okay. My number one is, I believe, Joseph's number 4 and Jeremy's number something. What is All Quiet on the Western Front, Jeremy, for you?
That was my number 4.
Okay, you're number 4. What was it for you, Joseph?
I think it was his 3.
All right. All I know is it was later down the list.
It was his 3, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about All Quiet on the Western Front, then throw it to you guys. Then at the end, you guys could talk about Paths of Glory, because we all know that's Jeremy.
I still have my number 1.
It's not Paths of Glory. Oh,
no,
crap.
Paths of Glory was my number 2.
So, was it? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
My number 1 will be a little bit of a surprise when we get there.
All right, so this is what I'm gonna talk about. All Quiet on the Western Front. Okay, so a little bit of what Jeremy said about this film. It's about a German. It's about the German side of World War I, where we've got some films about the American side. We got them from the point of view of the French. We've got them from British stuff going on in Africa. But this All Quiet on the Western Front is about the German side of it. It starts out with these guys being school kids, and this teacher convinces them to join the German army. And it's just they get along, they're all friends, but little by little, they start realizing that they're on the wrong side of this, and that this is an ugly war, and their buddies, one by one, all these guys are getting killed. And it's a silent film. It's another one that's a silent film. came out in where's the year on here?
It's 1930.
1930, so very shortly after.
And I'm sorry, just to correct you a little real quick, Dan, it was shown in both a silent version and a sound version.
That's right.
It was the sound version is the one that I'm familiar with seeing.
No, you're right. You're right. No, I stand corrected on that.
Yeah.
It was shown in 2 different versions. And if you go look up, there's 2 different versions, release dates for it as well. So, yeah. And it really shows the ugly. I mean, and I brought up ugly a couple times. But because it's in black and white, you could see how nasty it's trench warfare, and it's just death, and it's death all around these guys, and it's just so just miserable. And the director, Louis Milestone, he really created a master, and it's based on a novel. A lot of people probably read this novel in school or in English class or whatever, because I read it.
Freshman year.
Yeah,
we read it.
These guys are raising their hand that they read it. So I'm not going to be the only one to talk about it. I'm going to give it to Joseph. Say some stuff about All Quiet on the Western Front. And then Jeremy, you could say some last.
Yeah. So I read this book year, and then I saw the movie. What the book movie, it's relentless, and really the Germans suffered, not just because but show them being humans and them just suffering almost everything that they had, just and brutal, but also pretty true to real life. Unfortunately, also, I saw this. I was really impressed and about how brutal some of the war scenes were in this movie. There's a part where a guy gets, you can see his, but like, absolutely. But for rewatch experience.
Jeremy, what are your thoughts on All Quiet on the Western Front, which was your number?
My number 4.
Number 4.
It's kind of interesting and amazing. Joseph and I are in different age groups. I'm quite a bit older than my friend Joseph is here, but I think we had a very similar experience with this movie. They showed this, that we read the book in school and we watched the movie in school, actually on an old Laserdisc player. And I just remember being just blown away by, once you kind of start watching it, getting into it, it doesn't feel like an old movie. It has this real clarity to it, and it really draws you into what these young people are going through. And these are children basically, and all of a sudden they're in this unthinkable situation. And the movie really does dramatize that as in real horrifying detail, like Joseph said. I think one of the things you really kind of have to look at when you're talking about these older movies is there's something called the production code in Hollywood, which eventually went into effect, and that there were certain things you could do and you couldn't do in movies under this code. Well, this movie was a pre-code movie. The code went into effect in 1934, so this was 4 years before that. And I think because of that, it's a little more graphic and a little more just frank about the horrors of everything these guys go through than maybe if it had been made a little later. And I think that kind of gives it some of its power too. And I do want to give a little shout out to Lou Ayres, who is the lead character in the movie. He is a really great actor who had a very long career. He was acting in movies all the way up to the 80s. So definitely want to shout him out. And it's a classic for sure. And one of the first really great Best Picture winners along with Wings.
Yeah, no, I can't say it. No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, this absolutely is a great movie, and it came out at a time where they didn't start doing all that stuff. Well, you can't say this and you can't do that. You can't have blood and you can't have violence, and it really. And I just want to bring up one more thing. A couple years ago, I did a series of shows I called the 52 must-see movies and why they matter, and with my friends Jeremy, my friend Andrew Cabral and Stephen Billings, and it was a book from AMC called The Essentials, and we took every movie and we watched every movie, and we did a scene by scene breakdown, and I do a scene by scene breakdown of All Quiet on the Western Front. So if you go to my YouTube channel, Dan Allen on YouTube, you can look up that episode if you want to see a scene by scene breakdown and have I believe it's my friend Mark Tordai maybe talked about that with me, that episode. I think I did a couple with him early on. So I just wanted to bring that up. All right, Paths of Glory, Joseph, take it away.
So, is a movie that I or a film class a couple of years ago, and this movie just really touched me and really really affected me. George McCready go from this respect to the point for of his own men because he wants a stupid promotion is just infuriating. He put thousands of at risk because suicide to do. Then later has them court-martialed, and then for years has to defend them, and just the injustice soldiers at the hands of their own country, their own justice system, really got me good and very sad also. And there's a really first part, other than the rest of them, like a lot of effects on trial. Justice is, and that just makes it even more. And then there's that is so seen it. It's so but it's also beautiful in a hope that also very emotional and teary also when wanted more, which is why I bid on the full for
Joseph
the last round and
yeah, he added this to our Trivia League Full Metal. You could submit a movie to be in the round 3, so it might show up in your questions for the last round of our trivia. And this is a movie that Joseph put in, and I think quite a few people discovered it that way, and we're thankful for that. So yeah, it's a great movie that I'm so glad Joseph shared it that way. I remember when you did that, how touched I was, because it's a favorite of mine too.
Yeah, very good choice to put in there, Joseph. I put a couple great movies that I absolutely love too, and a lot of people don't like one of the ones that I put. It's a great movie, so I wanted people to see it. I wanted to get their eyes, and that's what that whole third round is for, to kind of shed some light but also put great movies in there. We're getting off tangent here. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on Paths of Glory?
Well, Stanley Kubrick, this was an early film of his, and obviously he's a very famous director, and there's certain movies he made that people are very aware of, but I think he's kind of thought of as a very cerebral director, and I think some people look at his movies as being kind of cold. And you can see from, you know, the passion and the emotion of Joseph there, that this is not a cold movie. This is a movie that you really feel a lot as you're going through this. This is a movie of real human stuff that is going on, and it really shows, you know, Kubrick is not just, you can't just pigeonhole this filmmaker. This is a great filmmaker. He could make a movie that would rip your heart out like this, and then he can make those other movies. And yeah, this is a story about, like Joseph kind of pointed out, it's a story about injustice. And injustice is something that happens in war. And not all war movies are going to just be about combat and, you know, fighting and stuff. A lot of times war movies are going to be about how people are just the victims of an unjust system and a terrible situation that sprouts up around war. And, you know, though the movie is very specifically World War I and it takes place in France and all this stuff, I mean, this is what happens in this movie is very universal to something that has happened and unfortunately continues to happen anytime that you have war and combat and generals and politicians and presidents and prime ministers and anything that it is. This kind of stuff's going to happen where people make political decisions at the expense of people's lives, at the expense of their own people's lives. And this movie dramatizes that in such detail. You see from point A to point B to point C, you know, how this all goes down. And you have the great Kirk Douglas, and I think one of his best performances, just caught in the middle of it, trying to do something. You know, he sees what the guys above him, what the generals are pulling. He's trying to get in there. He's trying to protect his guys, and it's just a machine. He can't do anything. But like Joseph talked about, ultimately at the end, you get this really beautiful scene in a inn where the French soldiers are just trying to let off some steam. They go to this inn, and there's this German woman who is there, and they're kind of ogling her. It's a very unsavory scene, and then she starts singing, and the whole thing kind of turns, and you see the humanity in the situation. And a little footnote: the actress who is the woman, the German woman singing, is actually became Stanley Kubrick's wife. So that's, you know, that kind of how he met his wife there. So it's a nice little extra thing you can kind of take note of there. And yeah, it's a very powerful movie. It's a movie that people still need to see today. And I can't take anything away from Joseph putting it at number one, because, you know, it was just almost there for me.
Yeah, I thought for sure both of y'all were gonna have it number one. To be honest with you, I will talk, and this is what I was going to say before. I actually had it at number one, and I thought I was going to go to my shelf, and I have a Criterion shelf. Mm-hmm. Pick it off the shelf, watch it, and then have it at number one. Then I go to my shelf, and I'm like, where the hell is Paths of Glory? And I can't. I must not have got it. I thought for sure on my last Criterion buy that I bought Paths of Glory, and I was going to watch it. I was going to finally watch it and see it, and then I'm going to have it at number one. And I didn't have it, and I didn't see it. And so guess what? I can't put it at number one if I didn't see it. So that's a little bit into the life of me, who was kind of pretty sad about that, because I really wanted to watch it for the first time and then talk about it on the show, but I don't own it. So
you still have 5 great movies, Dan. Nothing to feel sad about.
So,
and you still get the pleasure of watching it.
Yeah. But I knew it was about World War I. I knew about the court case. I knew about Kirk Douglas. I knew about Stanley Kubrick. I knew all that stuff. Just I haven't seen the movie, so it wasn't fair to put something that you haven't seen at number one when you haven't seen the movie. So, and that's why I was so glad that somebody had it, and it turns out both of you guys had it and had a chance to talk about it. So that's a little bit of honesty there, folks. So Mr. Jeremy has a number one, and it's not the same as mine or Joseph.
It is not.
So let's get into what your number one is.
So my number one is a movie that I'm going to go on a limb and say that both of you guys haven't seen, and a lot of people haven't seen, but to me, it is one of the greatest films ever made. And I urge everyone, whether it's Criterion or however you can get a hold of it, it is one of the all-time masterpieces. And it is a film from the French director Jean Renoir, and it is called The Grand Illusion. This movie came out in 1937, and it is one of the first in a very long genre, kind of helped start a genre that would become very well known later on, especially in American cinema, and that is the POW movie. This is a movie about French soldiers. They're captured at the beginning of the film, and they're taken to a German POW camp. And it's basically, kind of an escape movie. It's basically these guys surviving in this POW camp and, plotting various escapes. There's some escapes that don't, work out. They get thwarted and all that kind of stuff. You would see the same kind of storyline later on with movies like Stalag 17, The Great Escape, and many times over. But this really kind of was one of the first story of that kind. And there are a couple things that I think kind of set it apart. It's a very poetic film. Jean Renoir was a great filmmaker of this era who, he wasn't just telling stories. He had a viewpoint. He had political messages he wanted to get across. There was a lot of metaphor in his films. I think the movie he's most well known for is probably The Rules of the Game, which on the Sight and Sound list that they do of like the best films ever made, The Rules of the Game is usually at the top of that list, like in the top 5. It comes up a lot. And that's a movie about high society rich people having a get together at their estate and various things that happen. And the entire movie is a metaphor about class and the ills of society and kind of how people live double lives and all this stuff. And The Grand Illusion is a movie about just how people are all kind of the same, even though we're separated and we're at war with each other and all this stuff. We kind of have ideals that we cling to, and we have social norms that we have to act out. And there's a lot of like comedy in the movie where the German soldiers are very polite to the French soldiers and the French soldiers are very polite to the German soldiers. And it's like, we're all here to kill each other, but we have kind of this like social structure that we have to build. And, but underneath we kind of like hate that guy, but we can't let on. It's a lot of very human behavior that he's kind of getting at. And he's using this wartime situation to tell these kind of larger ideas. And I think the real standout thing about this film is a great actor and filmmaker of the early film silent era into the sound era is the great Erich von Stroheim, who he made a very well-known movie in the silent era called Greed and some other great films in the Hollywood system, actually. And then his career in Hollywood kind of fell off, so he went back to Europe and did some films, did some acting there. And he actually plays the head of the camp, Captain. Man, he has an amazing name in the movie. It's Raffenstein, Captain von Raffenstein. But he loves these, like he has such respect for French soldiers, like overly so. He's just totally polite to these guys. He's this really like, he looks kind of scary. He's got like the monocle and the cap, the helmet and all this stuff. And he's got this black jacket. You think he's going to come in and just give these guys hell. And he's just overly polite to these guys. Cause it's all, they're soldiers and we're soldiers and I respect these guys. And when they escape and break the rules and do all this stuff, he doesn't come down on them. He's just kind of sad and he's just like, oh, okay. And it's really, he's amazing in the film. And you might know him if you know the great film Sunset Boulevard. He plays the butler in that film, Max. And that was kind of an amazing comment. In that film, he was this director who had fallen on hard times and become a butler to Norma Desmond. So that was a comment on his own career. And I think he's kind of almost commenting on himself here and his image in this movie, where he had kind of been an imposing figure in the films that he made. And now he's a more almost kind of ridiculous character who's, got this role of authority, but he really doesn't have authority. And yeah, it's one of the great French films. It's one of the great films of the classic era. And the ending of the movie, which I'm not going to give away, but it involves some very gorgeous photography, and it's kind of an emotional release. You will not forget it. It's a tremendous ending. So I know a lot of people haven't seen it, and I hope, if anything comes out of talking about these movies today, we've talked about some great movies that aren't as well known, and this is the one that I would urge everyone to see more than any other, The Grand Illusion.
All right, Joseph, you got any thoughts on The Grand Illusion?
I would if I've seen it. Haven't yet.
All right. All right. So we're going to get some honorable mentions. Give me one or two honorable mentions, Joseph.
so honorable mentions because I was pretty good with the. Now that Jeremy had mentioned the African Queen, which I forgot was World War One,
Yeah.
I would say that would be my honorable mention.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeremy, you got any?
Yes. Well, I feel a little bad because I left one off because I was almost certain you were going to have it, Dan. I had it locked in at number 5, but then you didn't have it. So, but I'm glad because I got to talk about the big parade. But it's the 1981 Peter Weir film Gallipoli, which is a really great movie that I really urge everyone to see. Basically, it's a story about some Australian soldiers who go to Turkey to be in a battle, and they kind of find out as it goes on that this is a very bad situation that they're intentionally being put in, and it's a very tragic film. But it's very young Mel Gibson in that film. It's tremendous. Peter Weir, one of the great filmmakers in my opinion, and they actually have made another version of this more recently. But I urge you to see the 80s one. One that I strongly considered putting on my list. I just couldn't quite do it, but if somebody did, I wouldn't begrudge them. Is Wonder Woman? Patty Jenkins. I love that movie. I think it's a great superhero film. I think it's a tremendous superhero film, and I think it really does portray the World War I scenes in more detail than you would expect. And it is a World War I movie, and I think it's a great. She's a great role model for a lot of people, and it's a different kind of World War I movie. It's a superhero movie, so it gives you a different flavor.
No, you're right, Jeremy. I don't have any argument with that whatsoever. That scene of No Man's Land is fantastic.
Okay, and then another one which is a little different. It only the World War I's only the beginning of the film, and then it kind of goes away from that. But it is kind of the emotional crux of the movie. Is a movie from the '90s called Legends of the Fall with Brad Pitt, Anthony Hopkins. A very kind of a melodramatic, romantic type of movie, kind of a sweeping movie. Ultimately, his character ends up wrestling bears and stuff, so it's kind of larger than life and mythic in a certain way. But it's a really good movie. It's a great young Brad Pitt. The World War I conflict scenes at the beginning are very memorable, and that's one I wouldn't quite put it top 5, but it's definitely one I would give a mention to.
Let's steal them all.
Oh, sorry. All right, I have 2 more, but you know what? I'll
them
leave
to you,
Dan. All right. I just have to give a mention to Steven Spielberg's War Horse. Not one of his best films. Sorry, but I do think it's a good. I'll let you talk about that one a little more in your honorable mentions, Dan. And then the other one, another great foreign film that I just want to give a quick mention to is Joy Noel or Merry Christmas, which is a French film. I think German-French co-production with Diane Kruger, which is about a ceasefire between the French and the Germans during Christmas, where they actually come together to talk and have a Christmas celebration in the midst of combat. So it's a true story, and it's an amazing film. So there's a lot of great movies in this topic, more than you would think, basically.
Yeah, that's you and I had a conversation with somebody who will not be named, and we're like, I can't name one, let alone 5.
Yeah.
And then I put 10 down, and they're like, oh, I've seen 2 of those.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not asking that person. I'm asking somebody that might have seen 5 or 6 or 7 who would want to be on the topic. And we found someone in Joseph, which is good. Besides you and me, Jeremy. War Horse. I mean, I rewatched it the other day, and I'll tell you what, that is a great movie based on a Broadway play. Based on a Broadway play, and great. There's so many cameos in the film of Tom Hiddleston's in there. There's God, I can't think of everybody.
Benedict Cumberbatch, I believe.
Benedict Cumberbatch is in there. Toby Kebbell is in there. It really gets down and dirty. Steven Spielberg does not hold back. Look, we know he did his World War II movie, Saving Private Ryan. He didn't hold back there. He's not going to hold back with World War I either. And what a great hell. Oh, no, it's not Helena Bonham Carter. It's Emily Mortimer. No, is it Emily Mortimer? I think it is.
I'd have to double check on that. It's been a little while.
I think it might be Emily Mortimer at the beginning, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. I always get my names wrong. I mistake names a lot. So if I get it wrong, just say in the comments I got it wrong. But yeah, Gallipoli, phenomenal.
Emily Watson.
Emily Watson.
Another great actress. Yes.
Very great. She's great as the mother of the boy at the beginning, and
Jeremy Irvine. Yeah.
Guy, and she's giving him a hard time about buying the horse and all. It's kind of funny. That stuff at the beginning is kind of funny because it gets serious later on. But there is a great scene in War Horse, and I know it's honorable, where the horse gets stuck in barbed wire.
Yes, tremendous.
And the American soldiers stop and wave a flag, and then the German soldier comes over and he helps him, and they're bickering about who gets to get the horse, and it's funny. But they stopped the war, they stopped fighting to release this animal from barbed wire, which is a phenomenal scene in the movie. There's no sound, there's nothing. It's just these two guys freeing this horse from barbed wire. Great scene. In Gallipoli, Dustin Hoffman. Oh God, Paul Newman. You can't.
Wait. What movie? No, that's Papillon.
Papillon. My bad. Take that away. Cut that. I don't edit it out. I can't.
That's all right. Similar title. Now, Gallipoli is an Australian film. Yeah,
that's right.
Young Mel Gibson, and there are two guys that are sprinters. They want to be sprinters, then they go into the combat in Turkey, and then their sprinting comes into play in a unique way.
Yeah. And The Water Diviner with Russell Crowe is another one.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen that one. I definitely wanted to check that one.
You don't want to see that. You don't want to see The Water Diviner.
Oh, okay.
But, all right, Joseph, go 5-1, your entire list.
I'm sorry?
Can you give us your countdown, your 5-1, your list, Joseph?
Like a refresher up?
Yeah, just count down your 5-1. We'll do ours. We'll let him come back and give us those. You want me to go through mine, Dan?
Yeah.
All right. So my number 5 is the 1925 film from King Vidor, The Big Parade. My number 4 is All Quiet on the Western Front. My number 3 is The African Queen. My number 2 is Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory. And my number 1 is the 1937 French film from Jean Renoir, The Grand Illusion.
All right. My number 5 is Wings. My number 4 is They Shall Not Grow Old, the documentary. Well, Wings is the Best Picture winner from 19. Did they do the Oscars the same year back then, or do they do them the next year like they do
now? For which movie?
For Wings.
Yeah, I think it came out in 27, and then they would have done I think they did the ceremony in 29, so it was a little later.
Okay, so Wings won the Oscar in
29. Yes,
but it came out in 1927. Just
exactly.
They Shall Not Grow Old, the documentary by Peter Jackson. A very long engagement, directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, starring
Audrey Tautou. Yeah.
Number 2, Sergeant York, Best Actor winner, Gary Cooper. And number 1, All Quiet on the Western Front. Just an absolute classic, great book and great movie. We can't really get to Joseph right now, so I think we lost Joseph, unfortunately. I believe he had Wings. Did he have Wings?
I think he did. I'm trying to remember his order, though.
No, he didn't have Wings. He had Sergeant York at 5.
Yes.
All Quiet on the Western Front.
At 4, yes.
I believe at 4. His number 1 was Paths of Glory. What the hell was his number 2 and 3? I can't think of what his number 2 and 3 were. Oh, well. I can't remember.
Yeah. I think All Quiet was his number 3, actually.
Okay.
I can't remember what his 2 and his 4 were. Oh, well.
I can't remember either.
Rewind the tape, guys. You'll see it.
Yeah. You'll see it. All right. So, Jeremy, where can you be found?
Jeremy Paul Adams on both Facebook and YouTube. I'm at Full Metal Trivia and Full Metal Media. channel on YouTube and Facebook where we do trivia shows and content there, and we're actually going to be doing bringing back some content like this where we actually talk movies, so look for that in 2020. And if I'm sure most people watching are aware of the Movie Trivia Schmodown, the great show on YouTube, and I'm a writer over there, so always check those out as they drop. They've got the draft coming up in a couple weeks here, so we're all looking forward to that.
Yes, absolutely. You can find me at Dan Skipbound on Pinterest, Facebook. Why did I say Pinterest first? I meant to say Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then Pinterest. I do Pinterest. I do lists and things on Pinterest. My Instagram is working, so you can go on there and look at different things that I do on Instagram. Also, I'm a writer for 2 different websites, Cinesportstalk.com. That's CINESPORTSTALK.com, where I write about sports and movies, and Disappointment Media. That's IPOINT Media, MEDIA, disappointmentmedia.com, where I write about movies and I do lists and I do different various film reviews and all kinds of stuff like that. So, and I've been doing a lot of my top 10 lists of the decade of 2019. I've done my favorite actors and various supporting roles and all that kind of good stuff. So if you want to go to those 2 websites, you can see some stuff that I wrote. So for Jeremy and Joseph and myself, good night.